Nice to be here. Happy to talk a little bit more about Shape Up. Thanks, Klaus, for setting the stage a bit there. And what I want to do today is I want to talk about kind of what this looks like in real life. So I want to, instead of giving a lot of theory or trying to explain something, I want to do like the minimum theory necessary just to bootstrap us and get us into looking at what does an actual project look like if we work in the Shape Up style. And I'm curious, I don't know if this already happened, but is anyone familiar with Shape Up already here? Yeah, quite a few hands. Okay. Is anyone doing it? Let's say some version. Usually I get more hands when I say some version, you know? That's a big part of the story today, is that the reality is, the by the book and what really happens are different. And that's especially why I want to show you a case study today, because we can talk more about what's an example of what it can really look like. Okay. Is there anything else I want to tell you before we start? One thing, this is Code Talks, and one of the things I want you to pay attention to is the role of technical questions throughout the product lifecycle. I think that this is very much undervalued in most of the teams that we're seeing today. Whenever we talk about product, we're seeing a lot of Figma files and product folks talking about business questions, and projects blow up because of technical unknowns. Projects take 3 times longer because of things that we didn't see until we really got our hands dirty and looked into the details. So that's also something I want you to be kind of focusing on as we go through here. And I'm going to do my best to leave a healthy amount of time for questions, because I detected in the halls already that there are really a lot of interesting questions. And I want to make sure that we have time for that. And I'm going to try and, infect your brain with some strange viruses, in the first 30 minutes. And then you can say, what was that? And what does it mean? And it'll stimulate questions. So please start formulating them, as you're watching. Okay, so let's dive in here. I'm going to do the minimum necessary theory to get us into the case study, okay? And the way of doing that is I'm going to present to you 2 assumptions and a little bit of language, all right? And I think the first one is not too risky, but they're a little bit unclear, these assumptions, whether they're true or not. First assumption. My first assumption is that when we are building, so if we are in a 2-week time box or a 6-week time box, whatever it is, if we're building something, that engineers' time is valuable and should be used well. Okay, this is an assumption. I don't know if, okay, everybody here is maybe on board with that. That's good. And how do we actually do that? Well, if we want to use our time well, we need to have some clear direction about what it is that we're building. Right? If we're going in circles having debates about what this means, or what is it, or where did it come from, or how do I handle this edge case, So when I'm using the term shaping here, I'm referring to figuring out what we're actually building, okay? And then in order to decide what it is that we're building, we have to have some clarity around what problem are we solving. And I'm going to use the term framing for that. Okay, so just what is the business problem? What is the itch that we're trying to scratch? What are we trying to solve here? And of course, our selection of like what problem are we solving, there are bigger things that are driving that. There's going to be bigger things going on in the business. There's going to be different kinds of pressures or strategic things that need to happen that are informing the decision of this thing is what we want to be doing now instead of next year. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second assumption, the first one is kind of easy. The second one is, I think, a little trickier. Second assumption, given that there are a bunch of different problems and ideas and requests and things that people want to do, and there has to be a decision made around what are we going to spend our time on, what are we going to build. Once we put that into some time and we decide we're going to build this thing, this may sound crazy, but the assumption is that we actually want to finish it. So I don't know how many of you are finishing projects. Okay, now I have some reaction. Thank you. Okay, and two hands, two very proud hands. We are finishing. So thank you. Okay, and what do we usually see? Of course, everybody wants to finish things, but do we insist on finishing things, and do we design our process around finishing things that are good? Right. What we usually see is a lot of very open-ended projects. Where we don't know when we're done, or we don't have the end in sight, and we're reinvesting again and again and again, keep coming back to the table. Oh, it's going to be another few cycles, just a few cycles, just one more. And the other thing that we often see is tiny little slices, little sprints, one after the other. Each sprint is too small to actually finish something that matters in a big way to the customer. And because no sprint alone is delivering value, in theory, they're going to add up to something, but usually we don't know where it's going. So we just have sprint after sprint after sprint after sprint, right? So these are things that we don't want. So we want to have some kind of the ability to say, in 6 weeks from now, or in 4 weeks from now, or whatever it is, but in some unit of time from now that is not more than, let's say, 6 weeks, we are going to do what we said we were going to do, and somebody is going to say, thank you very much, that's helpful. We're glad that you shipped that, okay? And this is what ShapeUp is about. It's an alternative, it's basically the only alternative I know of to the sort of agile Scrum way of working that's popular today. And it was born out of my time at Basecamp. I was there for 17 years. And the key ideas here are we want to have this finishing things and using time well, so we want to have this higher output. The way that we do it is by creating much more clarity up front about what the scope is, what are we building, what are we solving. And then because we have that clarity, we don't need to be churning in constant status meetings and what are we doing, what did we do yesterday, and what are we going to do tomorrow, and we can have much, much, much more autonomy in the teams where we don't have to be scratching our heads all the time saying, what are we doing and what's next? Okay, so this is a pleasure, actually, when we can get there. So now here's the thing, is the book describes, when I wrote the book, I described how we worked at Basecamp. And as I mentioned, I had been there for 17 years, or maybe 16 years at the time, and we were a little bit of a happy bubble, to be honest, only senior developers, every designer could code, founders were totally hands-on in every decision, cash cow product, there were a lot of things that not every company has. So you'll see a lot of, basically any company that tries to adopt ShapeUp, and all of them who did it successfully broke the rules in the book. They had to hack it in different ways, and they had to make adjustments in order to make it work for them. So I want to show you a case study of a real project that shipped about 3 weeks ago. This is a project that I worked on I'm working as a fractional CPO right now for this company. They are unlike Basecamp. They have a much more typical tech stack, typical role definition, typical talent level, that kind of a thing. Actually, they're quite good, but they're structured more like what you would see in a team, in a team that you commonly meet. And let's look at how did we actually go through this process. Okay, so we're just going to dive into the beginning. So I came in as fractional CPO, and the first thing that I did was I needed some way to guide us through this end-to-end process, okay? And I didn't want to have to teach people anything, okay? Because trying to teach people theory and stuff, it's difficult. I wanted just to be able to start. So here's what I did. I created a Kanban this is just a Notion database, okay? Very simple and dumb, with these 4 different sections, okay? So, and I went to leadership, this is the C-suite, and I said, okay, so you want me as fractional CPO to know, make something important happen for you and ship it, right? So what we need first is a candidate. What is something that you at a leadership level think is important that we should do together in the next cycle, okay? So we are going to follow the story here with a little bit of a graphic, okay? So what I'm showing here these are days. Every column is a day. And we are seeing, these are meetings, okay? So first thing that happened here, can you see my tiny, tiny mouse? Yes, good, okay. So here what happened on day one, when I asked them, I need a candidate. I need something you think is important to work on. The C-suite got together without me. They talked about what do they think is important. And then the next day, me as CPO, I met with the CTO, and he was kind of passing on the information. He said, so we talked, we have a conclusion. What we would like to do is improve the dashboard. Okay, so I hear improve the dashboard. And I don't know if any of you have ever been asked to build a dashboard or change a dashboard, but as soon as I heard that, I have a lot of questions appearing in my mind. You know, I'm asking myself things like, okay, what's wrong with the dashboard today? How would I know if I was making it better? You know, like, how am I going to decide what's in the scope and what's out of the scope? How am I going to know if we're done? It's such a fuzzy definition. And this isn't the fault at all of the leadership team. Most projects, they come to us in this form, right? So this isn't just me being picky that I want to have more answers. If I don't have answers to these things, I know that some things are going to go wrong. So first of all, if I don't understand what it means to be done and what it means to make the dashboard better, then this project is going to spiral in scope. Because anything that is better is in scope, right? So every little thing we might be able to do or could maybe do, kind of, there's no way to say no to it. So the project is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? The other thing is, if I just say, well, let me just do whatever I think is good to improve the dashboard. I'm the CPO, you know what I mean? So let me decide. Well, if I just do what I think is going to improve it, chances are very high that I'm going to come back after 6 weeks and people are going to say, oh, that's not what we had in mind, right? That's not what we meant. So I don't have any way to know that I'm solving the problem that they want, right? Both from a business standpoint and from a customer standpoint. And if we don't build really clear conviction, like this is a problem we understand and we care about, then I don't know if you've had this experience, but it can happen that you're in the middle of a project, improve dashboard, and nobody really knows what it means exactly, other than a whole bunch of tickets, you know? And then something seemingly more important comes along and now you're getting pulled away to work on something else. Right? If I can build more clarity and conviction on what this means, I can make sure that the team has focus and nobody is going to want to take people away from the project because they're going to say, no, we need that to happen. We want that to happen next. Okay? So, where are we? I come away from this first meeting with the CTO. I have a candidate I put on my Kanban board, OS dashboard. Okay? What do I need to do next? I want to answer those questions. So my goal next is, how do I get this to the first checkpoint that I've defined where the frame is go? Meaning, I now have a clear understanding of the problem and outcome. I understand what we're trying to solve here. So now I have to figure out, how am I going to answer these things? So I ask the CTO, who is the person I can talk to who knows about why the dashboard is a problem today? Right? Who knows about that? And he says, oh, we have Trent in sales, and he's the subject matter expert. He knows deeply about the customer situation here. He has the story. Perfect. So I know my next move. So I arrange a meeting a couple days later with the subject matter expert with Trent. And I get together with Trent, and what happens here is he shows me the dashboard, current dashboard of the product, and he explains something. I'm going to give you the short version here, but what he explains is this is a product for the owners of gyms, okay, where people go to work out. And the product was, it has these new user panel, new users, new members of the gym, latest sales. And he says, you know, these might be useful features for a big gym, but all of our customers, it turns out, are tiny independent gyms where there's one owner and they know everybody. They know every member that comes through the door. And he said for them, seeing new users and new sales has no value at all because they know everybody. So I said, okay, so what are the things that are actually a problem for this small independent gym owner? And he says, let me show you. And he pulls up a spreadsheet from when he had a gym. And the big thing that he's monitoring is Maybe you can guess. Failed membership payments, right? Anybody who's in a recurring revenue business knows about Dunning. So he said, this isn't surfacing failed membership payments. I said, where do we find that in the app? Is it surfaced somewhere? He said, yeah, and we click through 3 reports and turn on a filter, and then we can see the missed payments, right? He said, aha, okay, we should surface the failed payments on the front. And I said, just surfacing something that we already know on the front, on the dashboard, it doesn't feel maybe big enough. Is there more we could do? And he described another case. There's something around class utilization. When they have group classes, how many people book for the classes, how full are the classes, so that he can make a decision about what classes to offer over time. So some kind of an indication around their class utilization. So we said, okay, so I think I've got it. This is what I took away. This isn't valuable to small gyms. New users and new sales aren't valuable to them. The things that matter to the small gyms who are actually the leads coming in and buying this thing are missed payments and class utilization. We could kill those 2 panels, show missed payments and class utilization on those 2 panels. Fantastic, right? So what this meant is we could redefine what we're doing from improved dashboard, which was really fuzzy, to we need to show these specific metrics that are important to small business, to small gym owners. Okay, now already I'm feeling like we're making progress here because this is something I can kind of see the edges of, I can see the end of. And if you look at this from a technical point of view, you can already start to imagine, okay, do I have the data I already need? Is it just a matter of revealing it here? I already have the endpoints, et cetera, right? So at this point, I move the card and say, the frame is go. I understand this is real, this is a problem I think I can work on. Now we're ready to go deeper. So the question that I asked myself is, okay, you might think, show the missed payments on a panel, show the percentage of classes that were booked and not booked, or how many bookings there were for classes. How hard can it be? Right? And, maybe you might just jump in and start building at this point or going to a team, but I've had the experience on so many projects that there are always unknowns. There are always things about the data model, edge cases that we haven't surfaced yet, time bombs, I think maybe Klaus mentioned, right? There are going to be ticking time bombs of things that I don't understand, and I don't want those time bombs to be blowing up in week 3 of the project, right? I don't want the team supposed to be building something and all of a sudden, oh, we don't understand this, what do we do here? So I want to be able to surface those unknowns, and especially the technical ones, earlier in the process. So what I'm going to do next, instead of just going into building, is I'm thinking, now I need to shape this. So how can I get clearer about what we actually have to do to make this happen? And I go to the VP engineering and I just say, who is the person who knows the most about this product is called OS, the OS product. Who is the person who is most familiar with that? And he points me to one particular senior engineer. So he says, go talk to him. So fantastic. So next step, the frame is go. We're past that checkpoint. Now we're ready to go deeper and start shaping. So I book a call with the senior engineer and say, can we look at this together? And we get to the whiteboard. So we have this was about a 2-hour call. And I'm just going to jump over to the whiteboard to show you. So this is the whiteboard for the life of the project. But we're just going to look at this first session. So I had captured my understanding of the frame here. Notice, this is not some big document. This was enough to pass the framing checkpoint. I can spell out the problem in simple terms. I understand the problem. I can kind of rehydrate and tell the problem to other people in order to work on it. Then this is what happened in the shaping session. I sketch out the overview panels on the current, dashboard panels. I sketch those out. I point out we have these 2 panels that we need to populate. Sounds easy enough. We start digging through, figuring out how does, sales versus invoices versus contracts, how are these modeled, how do we get to a failed payment, et cetera, right? So we're already digging in, and we get to a first kind of a design, and we already start to surface some interesting big challenges. So it's easy enough, can you see this? Yes. It's easy enough to say on the overview we're going to show missed payments. And the missed payments block is going to consist of just a row of the missed payments that we can query, right? But what happens when I click on a missed payment? You know, to see more detail or to act on it, where do I go? I didn't talk about this with the subject matter expert. Turns out that the place that we have in the current system is a sale detail page. And this sale detail page, well, it's the oldest, grossest part of the system. It doesn't only handle members, it handles one-off sales, retail sales, invoiced sales, and recurring sales, like all mashed into one thing. It has 4 different tabs that are all actually part of the same hairy ball of code. It's a mess, okay? So if we want to actually make this page surface the right things, just even from a UI standpoint, we would have to unwind so much complexity and factor out, different versions of this screen and untangle all kinds of legacy code and stuff. So we hit already something complex that we needed to design around. We did that. We came up with an approach. We used some of the techniques that we know for handling cases like that, for handling legacy situations. And in the end, we got to a reasonable design, actually. We came up with a design where we could have kind of we're gonna have a new route and a new endpoint for just the thing we need to show, and we're gonna treat everything else like we're gonna push everything a layer back. We're not gonna have to mess too much with the legacy stuff. We got to a pretty good kind of design of how we can do this, but we had some unknowns that came up. There were some unknowns around like how do we handle multiple failed payments? There were questions like, does the gym owner actually want to update the payment method themselves? So like you're at the gym, seeing the person, do you want to be able to take a card and update it right there and then? Or do you have to only be able to send an email and they go through a loop, et cetera, right? So we got some kind of domain questions, problem questions, framing questions about like, how does this actually work and what do we actually want? On the utilization side, the course utilization side, we dug into the class utilization. We dug into this, and we had especially one very big problem, which is we didn't understand the time scale that the gym owner needs to see. And the time scale, turns out, the data model for booking classes was not so simple. And querying utilization on a report that you want to see all the time was going to be a big effort, right? And if we need to see trends over 6 months versus over 3 weeks, it's going to be a different query with different performance characteristics, okay? So you see, we're very early in the project, and we're already hitting these technical things that blow up the project, okay? So, okay, I need to get answers to these things. So that's what happened in the first shaping session. If we come to the output of that, we made progress. We've got a design. We hacked our way through some legacy tricky stuff. But I've got some questions again for the subject matter expert. How are we supposed to deal with multiple failed payments? What about the in-person situation? And what is the time scale for the class utilization? So I had another session. Next day, I met with the SME, asked these questions, and we had an interesting time. We had some very interesting things coming up, So it turns out, first of all, he gives simple answer about class utilization. Okay, we can work with that. But then we start talking about the missed payments. And the more that you start to talk about things, the more you learn, right? So it started to get more complicated. And especially what we discovered was we have missing features here. As soon as we started asking questions about these different cases, we realized, look, there's no way to retry a payment that failed when the card is valid but the balance is insufficient. Like, shouldn't we have that? There's no way to request a card that's not tied to an invoice. I'm not going to get so much into the details here, but you get the idea. There were missing features here. And we said, wow, these are things we could really improve that would make a big difference. So we actually ended up kind of reframing and refocusing the project. We said, look, we could focus this thing 100% around recovering the missed payments, not just seeing them, knowing about them, but actually acting upon the missed payments to recover them. And then I said, okay, so if we're going to add this retry feature and this kind of request new card feature, I'm not sure if we're going to have time in the time box to also do this class utilization, right? And he said, I only told you about the class utilization because you told me you needed more. Yeah? So he said, yeah, it would be nice to have, but it's not like we need that. So we totally redefined, we made a trade-off, you know? Oh, what if we didn't add anything to the overview about utilization, and we just totally focused this from being about small gym metrics to this is all about payment recovery, right? And you'll notice, that this is still, it's on the same vector as the original candidate that came in. I'm talking to the same person who has the story behind why we're doing this project. So even as the definition is changing, I'm confident that I still have the alignment from above. That as we modify this, that everybody's going to be saying, I know that if I go back to the C-suite again and I say, hey, we figured out, actually I did this the next day, I'm like, hey, we looked at the dashboard. Did you know that we're not even dealing with payment recovery? And they were like, what? And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. They're like, yes. So, okay, I'm getting excited, but these are really nice moments when you say, oh, here's a real problem, right? That's alignment. That's the conviction we want from framing, by the way. Okay, so now we've understood that we need these new features. We want to do that. We're going to focus so we can use our time on that. I go back to shaping. We have another session. So now I've got, but this time I bring in the subject matter expert together with the senior engineer, and the three of us do the next shaping session. And that's because I don't want to do this loop again. I think we're close, and if any unknowns come up that we need from the subject matter expert, I want him to be able to answer right there. So I only want to have one more session, okay? So that's what we did. And I'm just going to pan over. And this is where, I'm going to skip the whole story of the session, and this is where we landed. And what happened here is we got to a place where this thing does all the things that we think it needs to do. And we understand technically how we are going to do it. We understand the implementation. We've looked at the actual systems involved. We understand this, okay? So there came a point where we looked at each other and we said, this is going to work. This is something we can do. So at this point, the shape was go. This thing is something we understand how to build. I think I can bring this to people now. How did I actually bring this to people, and what did it look like to take this to a team? The first thing that needed to happen was, this alone is a good reference and a source of truth for what we solved. This is basically the design. But I want to be able to give something to people that they can really understand and get the whole backstory. So I did a write-up to capture what we concluded, and to be this is a source of truth for the project, and it's also something that is going to help us when we come to the kickoff. So I summarized the frame on top. This is like what problem are we solving? In case questions of trade-offs and scope come up, we can go back and say, oh, does that help us do this? Is that important in order to solve this specific problem? Then you can see I'm giving a little tour of the shape here. I'm explaining the key moving parts and wrapping up with a summary in the form of the breadboard. Okay? So that's the write-up that captures what we shaped. This actually just lived on the card. And then shape is ready. The shape is go. So what do I need to do in order to actually start building this thing? And for the team to have a good time and be successful doing it also. So the question I'm asking myself as I look ahead to building is, what could we actually see working, like a demo early in the first week? What would need to be happening, maybe first week, second week, third week, that would show this works, this is coming together, our hypothesis about what is possible is true? you know? I don't want to just go cycle after like sprint after sprint after sprint after sprint, not knowing where we are and then having just this work in progress loading up. And it's not until the 11th hour that we find out that we have problems, right? I want to see this coming together quickly. So how can I do that? So I planned the next live session we had was a kickoff session. So to kick off building, we had myself, the CPO, and the team. So this is the back-end engineer, front-end engineer, designer, and QA person in this case. And we also brought the subject matter expert along because very often new little detailed questions come up, and it's nice. It's nice if they can join. So we had the kickoff call. And here's what happened in the kickoff call. So we started off in the first hour just reviewing, going through the frame and the shape together. So I'm talking through the backstory. I'm helping them to see what's important here is I really want them to see the frame almost like this river that we have to cross, and they have to build the bridge, you know? And if they understand like this bridge has to be for heavy freight and it's so many meters across, or this is a pedestrian bridge, you know, they need to understand the gap that they're trying to get over. So this problem definition, we actually spend time on that just to make sure they have the backstory. And we go through the shape, and some questions start to come up. We detail a few things on the whiteboard. We come to a place where we all sort of see the same thing. That's the first hour. Then in the second hour, this is where we figure out what is the future going to look like. We create a map of the scopes. So we plan out scopes of work. Okay, so this is how we're going to see what is the demo that we expect coming. And this is an interesting topic. I'm going to give you the short version because of our time today. Here's the short version. After we had done this work together of planning the scopes, we had something that looks like this. So tickets are very good for incidents, for urgent things, for things that have a stakeholder on the other side of them waiting for a response. You know, tickets are, well, they're okay for batching bugs for a rainy day. They're actually not great at that either, but they can work. But when it comes to projects, I don't want to see 100 tickets or 200 tickets. If I'm going to understand where are we week after week for a project that is 6 weeks or less, I want to have a few big things to be looking at. So here we have 9 boxes, 9 scopes. And if you just do the math for a moment, take 6 weeks, 5 business days per week, that's 30 days, and you divide that by 9, you have a sense of the size of time that can go into each one of these boxes, right? It starts to get real. So, and what we're seeing here is what are the different things that we could build and demo and then check off and move on, okay? And how we get to these things is in the live session, we looked at the work together. We looked at the anatomy of the work. You know, we looked at the bones of the animal and the muscles of the animal to understand where are the moving parts, where are the joints, and we drew some slices. And these, very importantly, are vertical slices. You know, if you have a horizontal slice and you say, I'm going to do the front end for everything, right? 1,000,000 Figma files, right? Or 1,000,000 screens on a Figma file. Nothing works, right? I'm going to do the back end for everything. Again, nothing works. No way to demo, nothing to click on. If we say, for this particular slice of the whole effort, I'm going to get back end and front end and design. Like, I'm going to do all that, and I'm going to have one thing that works. And I'm going to have interfaces to everything else, or I'm going to have boundaries to everything else. That's what a vertical slice is. So we did this together. We figured out how we could slice this, and that became this. So you'll see that there's actually a clear mapping from one to the other. You'll see also there are some little colored dots in the corner. That is just us indicating the sequence. Right? So we want to tackle the things that are actually more likely to blow up or present problems or generate more excitement that we're seeing it working earlier. So we're not just doing all of the the easy things first. We're being intentional about the sequence of what we're going to do, in what order. So this screenshot is actually from early on in the project. And then if we fast forward a little bit from here to here, this is a screenshot from Slack. And you can see we're like maybe 3 weeks into the project here. And you see it's like a map with territories conquered. There's whole areas of the project that we don't have to think about anymore because they've been demoed and they're working and they're solved. Okay, so that is the kind of higher altitude view that we can get from working in scopes instead of doing things in a granular ticket basis. So that's the scopes, and how did we actually build each of these? So let's say if we're working on the retry now, okay, making this retry now button actually retry the card and run the payment again. We have to integrate a bunch of things, right? We have to have a back-end endpoint. We have to integrate with the payment processor that does it. We have to have screens and buttons for that, and we have to style it and make it nice. That work, thanks to the clarity that we created in the shaping and the shared understanding that we created at kickoff, and then the slicing down to one particular part of the overall map that we're working on, all of that together means the team knows what to do. They know what to do. And because they know what to do, now they have many small implementation decisions to make. They even have interesting decisions to make. But in the macro, they know what to do. And it means, you see, I don't know how many days that is, but that's more than a week, maybe even 2 weeks of pure asynchronous work. No need for a status meeting or a what the heck do we do next meeting or what are you doing and what am I doing meeting. There's no rituals, no meetings needed. We can just have communication asynchronously about what we're doing and we can see progress. Okay, it's incredible. And we don't have to push the teams. Everybody sees how they can make progress and what they can do next. And I want to show you what that looked like in this case. You might imagine a lot of teams after kickoff or somewhere in the front of this process, they would maybe make some Figma files and treat that as the source of truth. And you'll notice you haven't seen any high fidelity design yet, right? You've only seen wiring diagrams. So what is the story there? This is the progression of work, the order of operations that happened while they were working asynchronously. Started from the breadboard, saying, how does this thing in the scope, how does it work? Then back end and front end work together to wire an ugly version. Okay, it's something we can click on, it's something that works, but here they've just inherited all the existing styles and components, and it's ugly and it doesn't surface the right things in the right places, but it works. When it works, then we can just move the furniture around and apply some paint and everything to get it to the point where it's actually designed in full high fidelity. So the Figma actually came last. And this is not very common today in the software business, but in practical real life, this is totally understandable. If you're building a house, first you have to figure out where is the sink going to go in the kitchen, right? And if you know where the sink is going to go, then you understand where the water pipes have to be and so on, yeah? Then, after you know where the sink and the pipes are going to be, later you can make a decision about what is the paint, what is the exact tile that we're going to put on, right? There is an order of operations here, structurally speaking. So Figma doesn't need to happen at the beginning. In fact, it's too early in most cases. But later on, once the things are working, then we can layer on more style and make some final decisions there. So that's what happened here. And then we came to a place where all these things were checked off, the work was ready, and we were done. And I'll just show you what that looked like. So this was the document we were looking at. This was the document we looked at together at kickoff, right? And we ended at kickoff with this, with this breadboard. Then here's the launch brief that I wrote to inform, marketing and sales and the rest of the company about here's the change. So again, we explain the frame. Why did we do it? What's the before and after from both perspectives? And then you'll see here, all finished, nice looking, well, you can kind of see here, high fidelity, polished workflows. Like everything here is built out, everything is solved, and it all works. And on time. So that's the end-to-end of this particular project. I've got 2 reflections that I want to offer. So what is actually going on in this sequence of conversations, in this sequence of work steps? There's a quote from Jensen Huang that I heard that I thought, man, that's perfect. He said he doesn't need to know exactly where the apple, like he doesn't need to predict exactly where the apple will fall from the tree. He said that his job is to position the company in such a way that it's close enough to the tree so that when the apple falls, they can catch it, right? And I think this is a beautiful metaphor for what this kind of work is all about. Everything that we're trying to do here is about just getting closer to the tree. I don't know the exact detail of the Figma file, the high fidelity. I don't know the exact decision about every tiny edge case. There's a million small implementation decisions that have to be made. But if I know that we're working on the right thing, there's no technical blowups. We understand what we're doing. We've eliminated the biggest tangles of complexity. Then I can trust that even if there's an unanswered question, we can just come in and we can tune a few things, and we will get to that last mile in the parameter space. Okay, so that's the first thing as a reflection, is that you can see how what we're doing is we're incrementally investing in the project and we're incrementally getting closer to the tree. And the second thing I just want you to look at is look at how time was spent. So after kickoff, we have a long stretch of asynchronous work. I've got a couple sessions with the designer doing review together. And we've got, in this case, 1 group session where we really did a review together and kind of populated an issue list of like small things that need to get fixed. So there's all of this space here, and everybody feels this is valuable, we are using time well, we are shipping something that matters. And then what I also want you to compare that to is the time investment in the framing and shaping stage. Do you see? The framing and shaping is extremely spiky. It's like a small number of essential people who understand the problem, came together, and for 2 hours or for 3 hours worked really hard on a whiteboard. These 2 things fit together beautifully because when the team has a lot of clarity, when the team understands what they're doing, they see what they're doing, and they don't have constant status meetings and standing meetings and rituals that aren't helping them, there's space to get pulled out and sit in for 2 hours to shape something that's maybe happening next cycle, right? There's time to have a deep session if we really need to think and do some work together to solve a problem, right? So by removing the meetings that we don't want and don't need, we create the margin where we create that space where we can have deep sessions that actually help us to get closer to the tree. Okay, so I hope I have given you some things that could maybe lead to some questions. So I will end there and see if there's anything from your side.